You never know how a fantasy football draft is going to play out, and you can't always get the guys you want. But look, these are some of the running backs that you need to have in 2024. If you're ready to start drafting right now, you actually don't have to wait. Get on Underdog and do a best ball draft. They have tournaments open right now where you can draft and take advantage of those pre-NFL draft values on rookies, free agents, and more. Get in there right now. You can download the Underdog Fantasy app or click on the link in the description. Just make sure if you're signing up for the very first time on Underdog, use promo code NGAME because that gets you a 100% deposit match up to $100. All right, you can't always get what you want, but if you draft smartly, you can get some of these running backs. Who's the first guy you want to make sure you come away with?
I want to make sure I come away with Jonathan Taylor as much as I can this year. I think people have forgotten how good Jonathan Taylor is. Remember, this guy was a fantastic prospect coming out of college, was great as a rookie, finished as the number 6 scoring running back as a rookie, and then in year 2 was the best running back in the world, in the NFL, in fantasy, and everything. Was great. People were even saying like, oh, maybe Jonathan Taylor for MVP that year, I remember. And then the last couple of years dealt with injury, obviously a couple of years ago. Right, couldn't get healthy with that ankle. Every time he came back, got hurt. And then last year with the pup, with the contract controversy, dispute, whatever was going on, we really haven't seen this guy at his best the last 2 years. But when you look at him in his career so far, in games where he has played at least 60% of the snaps, he is averaging over 19 points per game in those games. And even last year, with everything that went on, with him being eased back into action, having to share opportunities and snaps with Zach Moss, he still averaged over 15 points per game. This is an elite running back. He's still young. He's still in his prime. He doesn't have a ton of wear and tear. All Jonathan Taylor needs to be an elite stud fantasy running back is to stay healthy, which is what we could say about almost every running back. I mean, we said this about Christian McCaffrey last year, right? Remember, he was coming off 2 injury-riddled seasons, and it's like, you know what? If he just stays healthy, he's going to be awesome. And he did, and he was. I think that's Jonathan Taylor this year. If he can just stay healthy, he's going to be awesome. And also, don't worry about the fact that he has a running quarterback like Anthony Richardson. We've seen many running backs with running quarterbacks be ultra successful. Look at the Ravens running backs. Look at the Bills running backs. Look at the Eagles running backs. It's going to be okay, even with Anthony Richardson. Jonathan Taylor is an absolute stud, and if he stays healthy this year, people are going to remember why he was the number 1 pick just a few years ago.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't always go running back early in a fantasy draft. Right now, there's about 3 guys that I would consider drafting in the first round. And one of them, I'm very excited to see possibly a full normal season for Breece Hall. Now, Breece Hall hasn't had just a regular season in the NFL because his first rookie season, it was slow played into the lineup, didn't really become the starter till midseason, and just when he was exploding onto the scene towards ACL. So last year, rehabbing, but also, look, he was there in the first half of the season. He was ready for week 1. But then they, for some reason, decided Dalvin Cook was going to split time with him. That turned out to be a mistake. And of course, the whole season was basically a disaster for the Jets because they had no semblance of a passing game. So Breece Hall did most of his damage just kind of as a check down, dump off kind of receiver out of the backfield because they couldn't throw the ball down the field. So he wound up being a very effective fantasy running back throughout the end of the season. But I think he can actually be an effective runner for a whole season for the first time finally because he should be completely healthy and recovered, and the Jets should have a decent quarterback named Aaron Rodgers. Hopefully he stays healthy as well. And look, you might think, okay, he had all of those receptions, right? In fact, he led all running backs with 95 targets and 76 receptions. That's pretty good PPR floor. So yeah, maybe a lot of those disappear because they're actually going to be able to pass the ball. Well, guess what? The whole offense gets better, and he actually can run the ball and not get stuffed at the line of scrimmage because the defense doesn't have to respect the pass. And he actually can score touchdowns. That's the one thing that's held him back. And yeah, he had a lot of value from those cheap little dump-offs and just volume of receptions. What if you actually give him more than 4 or 5 touchdowns in a season? I guarantee his fantasy points will go up. His rushing yardage will go up. Dalvin Cook thing is over. It's all Breece Hall next year on an improved offense. And you've got to think they're addressing that offensive line somehow this offseason. This guy is explosive. He is a great receiver out of the backfield. and we're finally going to see him unleashed. So, yeah, I think if I'm targeting a running back in the first round and it's not CMC with the first pick, it's probably Breece Hall. All right, let's say you miss out on those guys. Who is another running back you feel like you need to target?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm going to target Bijan Robinson, obviously, but I don't want to talk about Bijan in this video. I want to talk about another second-year running back that I really like, and that is Jahmyr Gibbs. I think we're going to see Jahmyr Gibbs absolutely explode this year. When you look at it down the stretch last year, Jahmyr Gibbs had 11 or more carries in 6 of the last 8 games. And now you say, well, okay, 11 carries, what's the big deal? Well, for a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, who already finished 8th among all running backs in targets, getting a bump in carries is a big thing, because remember, he was splitting with David Montgomery. He wasn't expected to be a between the tackles kind of runner. Early in the season, it was mostly David Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs kind of more of the change of pace guy. But we saw a shift as the season went on. It became more and more of a 50-50. And by my eyes, it almost looked like Dan Campbell started to trust Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more than David Montgomery. And so right there, that's encouraging. So you take a guy who's already a dynamic, explosive, playmaking running back. In fact, he ranked 2nd among all running backs in breakaway runs last year. A guy who's already a great pass catcher. Like I said, 8th in the league in targets last year. Heavily utilized in the passing game. And now you give him more carries. And oh, by the way, he finished 15th among all running backs in red zone touches. That was another worry here, was he's undersized. Is he going to have a chance to score touchdowns? I think we could put that to bed too. So he checked off every box we were worried about last year. Will he get enough carries? Will he get enough chances to score? I think he got plenty of that. And now going into year 2, he's probably going to get even more of it. And he's in this Detroit offense, this emerging offense behind a great offensive line with a head coach who seems to trust him fully. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is ready to explode in year 2 and just have a huge season.
Now, as of this moment, we're still many weeks away from the NFL draft, and free agency isn't even in effect just yet. There's a lot that's going to change. And so how do you value a guy like Saquon Barkley, who will almost surely be with a new team next year, because they're not going to franchise tag him? Well, I'll tell you how I value him as an elite running back, an RB1, possibly a top 5 fantasy performer. Why? Because he won't be a Giant. Now, let me tell you, it could be that simple, because if you look at the fact that somehow, someway in fantasy points per game, Saquon Barkley finished as the RB9, averaging almost 16 fantasy points per game last year in PPR scoring. That despite the fact that, according to PFF, the Giants had the 30th ranked offensive line. According to PFN, that's Pro Football Network, 31st. It is literally impossible for him not to get an upgrade in terms of run protection and offensive context. Let's not forget the fact that the Giants used a hodgepodge of quarterbacks last year, had absolutely no passing game to intimidate opposing defenses. So no matter where Barkley goes, he's going to get a bump in value. What if he goes to a team like, the Houston Texans, who are now rumored to be linked to him? Maybe the Baltimore Ravens, a team like that. I mean, you see the possibilities. He might not land in a dream spot, but there's a good chance that a team that's a running back away, like Houston, might decide it's worth it for a guy like Barkley, who, he's been around a few years, but he doesn't have that much tread on his tires. Injuries and, have kind of limited him, but he's still young enough. He's definitely still fast enough and effective enough. You can imagine him on any other offense. He could still be explosive. And so, a lot of people are going to probably have him ranked too low because of the uncertainty. How's he going to fit in? Is he going to hold up for a full season? I'm going to take the plunge, and I will say that I don't mind having Barkley still as my number 1 running back on draft day. All right, got one more running back. Tell me who you absolutely want as much as possible next year.
Yeah, speaking of free agency, the Titans have already said we are not franchise tagging Derrick Henry. He's going to be a free agent. And look, we pretty much know he's not going to be back, which means the door is open for Tyjae Spears to be the lead back here. He's currently being drafted as the number 18 running back, which to me seems crazy low for him. His ceiling is just so high. Already last year, he finished 9th among all running backs in targets and receptions. The issue was he didn't get any carries because he was playing with Derrick Henry. Only 100 carries last year, and even worse, he only got 3 carries inside the 5 because Derrick Henry had 17 of them, because that's what you do when you have Derrick Henry. You give Derrick Henry the ball when you're near the goal line. Now the door is open for him to be the guy in this offense. And this is going to be a much better offense than what we've seen in the past. It's going to be a more open offense. It's going to be an offense that actually pushes the ball down the field, puts drives together, Will Levis going into year 2, new head coach Brian Callahan. This isn't going to be the boring, grind it out. Hopefully Derrick Henry can take us down the field and fall into the end zone, and then our defense can hold strong. No, we're going to see a different offense here, a younger offense. And Tyjae Spears was a workhorse in college. He averaged 6.9 yards per carry his last year in college. He can handle a workhorse role. To go with the fact that he's already an exceptional pass catcher, was one of the best pass catching running backs in the NFL last year. So as long as the Titans don't do anything in the NFL draft to replace him, and really this is not a strong running back draft class, not that there's anybody you really worry about taking his job, Tyjae Spears should be the lead back in Tennessee, getting the bulk of the carries, and going as running back 18 just seems way too low for a guy whose ceiling is honestly top 10.
I'm all over that Spears pick and talk about him a lot this preseason. But let me go to a guy that I've talked a lot about all last season. I'll just bring it up again. I'm still on Brian Robinson Jr. Now, Brian Robinson, my bold prediction, my hope for him was he would finish as a top 15 running back last year. He might have done that if he didn't miss the last couple of games. But hey, running back 21, pretty good considering he played for the Washington Commanders. And we know how that went. Start out decently, and then it kind of all just fell apart. New coach next year, probably a new quarterback, and that's a good thing. The defense wasn't that great last year. They're going to improve on that. Again, I keep following this theme of offensive context because it matters so much for a running back. A running back can be as skilled as you want, but if the guys aren't blocking for him, if the passing game isn't effective, he's just not going to put up as many points. Washington should at least be better next year on offense. And Robinson was really effective, but the best thing I like about him is the fact that, the worry was, well, he's just kind of a in between the tackles guy. He's not really going to catch any passes. Might be another like Nick Chubb type at best. But we saw him more involved as a receiver out of the backfield, especially as the year went on. Wound up with 36 receptions. That's not amazing, but a lot of that came in the second half of the season when they realized, hey, this works. He had a game with 6 receptions, 7 receptions, 4 receptions, not just 2 or 3 here and there. And so this is something he can do. He's good at the goal line. He can be a do-it-all back, and they really don't have any competition for him. Antonio Gibson, probably not going to be back. Chris Rodriguez is just there. Nobody who's really going to threaten him. So I really feel like Brian Robinson will still be a good value next year. And when it comes time for like your late RB2 or early RB3 type where he's going, I'm going to pull the trigger once again. Those are some of the top running backs you need to grab for fantasy football this coming year. Who could be next year's RB1 that breaks out? Well, got you covered there too.